Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. So, for this movie, like, if people do not know what Monty Python is, because they've probably never heard of this before, maybe they've never gone on and seen Holy Grail and stuff like that, so, which is to probably be, like, the big movie for Monty Python, but a lot of people might feel differently about that. So, we have a movie that is to be like a bunch of skits that are all to be weird and goofy and fun, and at certain points we like have so much time taken on these like weird visuals and these kind of just goofy like sketches or skits throughout this film. And so throughout this movie we have like one person who is to be like 10 different people. And so, more than likely, it's going to be like very difficult to go on and like say who all everyone is and every bit of this. But I'm going to try to go on and do my very best to just kind of go on and like simplify this review to the point of me just kind of rattling off every sketch and skit and whatever. Um, and so when we actually get into like the teeing up portion of this review, I'm probably going to be very, very vague. Because there's just a number of random things that ended up happening throughout this film. And then when we actually get into spoilers, I'm just going to kind of rattle off just all the skits that happen in this film. And then call it a day. So with that says, so with that said, um, this movie was so odd. But then again, there's going to be a number of things that'll probably appeal to people. We of course have a whole entire skit where there's just a group of women that are all chasing a man, and they're wearing just helmets and knee pads, and that's it. And so this man is to I guess had chosen how to die, and we just have these women chasing after him, and we also have a scene in this movie where a teacher is to explain to guys how to please a woman, and he ends up going as far as actually performing the act right in front of them, and so like so there's a lot of weird and dicey things within this, but then there's also like the sketch where we have the like enormously fat guy who goes to this restaurant to order this mass amount of meal, and then is to try and get one last thing of food, which is to be this mint, and then we end up seeing the aftermath of that. So, and plus also, there's a number of things that tie in, like religious choices. There's a bunch of stuff that ties in to military-like stories, and then also there is to be a whole skit here that is to make fun of doctors and pregnancy and so on and so forth. You really don't actually see anything of the actual pregnancy, but we end up having like a whole joke where we have a woman who is to consistently be pregnant to the point of like babies are just kind of falling out of her consistently, to where she has like a whole room that has like 50 to 100 kids that are all in there, and we have the kids who are singing this whole song all about, and I have to kind of be sensitive here, try to skirt around certain words and to adjust the way of which that I'm going to talk throughout a good portion of this movie. So the kids end up singing a song basically about man juice, let's just say. And that man juice, they do a whole song about it, and then they end up having like another guy who is to mention about his religious beliefs. And since he is to go on and be this kind of religion, he can go on and slap a rubber on his Thomas or his John Thomas, which I guess he is calling his manhood. And we also have at one point uh, we have a guy who goes on to sing a song basically about his manhood, and he's to just kind of rattle off all these words and all these things that are to just talk about his manhood, and then he calls it a day. I'm like, that is so weird. Um, but yeah, so with that said, there's a cluster of huge number of skits that I'm going to go on into spoilers and talk about. So let me know in the comments below how you felt about Monty Python's Meaning of Life, as I'm going to go on now and tell you where to possibly watch this. So, Monty Python's Meaning of Life, I would go on and say this movie is okay. I would recommend people to watch this as possibly like a one of a kind like experience. Just to check out anything with Monty Python in it is worthwhile, even though this is very obscure. Like I would just tell people to check this out regardless, because there's just some goofy, funny, weird things in there that you might have a laugh with. So, with that said, where can you go on and possibly see this movie? Well, there's a number of different kind of apps that I would recommend. At some point, they may or may not exist currently through Google Play Store, but you can go on and hopefully find the equivalent of a number of these things to at some point uh, go on and find these. So right now, to the second this recording, you can go on and I would go on to a Google Play Store search and search the word Box UHD. And hopefully that will lead you to an app that is the equivalent of this, and you can go on and download this and be able to say you can see a number of things. I would also go on and hopefully have you find a app called Yes Movies. Um, and then also you could possibly go on and download a app also called Doxy, DOXCY, and hopefully be able to watch this film. Or you can also go on Stars. Stars, by and large, does have quite a bit of content that is actually pretty good. Like if you like wrestling content, you can go on to Heels and watch that show because it's actually really good. Or you can also go on into American Gods because, of course, that show is really like obscure but interesting. You could be laughing, but then also be very confused. And so I would recommend American Gods to a lot of people. Because it's on, of course, Stars anyways. So, with that said, let's just go on into that double five time territory. It's about that time again. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time you spoil this movie. So, we of course, in the very beginning of this, we have an intro that has very weird and goofy visuals. Sometimes of a woman without clothes on, but it is what it is with Monty Python. So, we at first have a number of fish, and all the fish are to be played by these actors. We kind of see them kind of like having these kind of like human heads for fish, and then they end up realizing that one of their fish friends had gotten eaten. So queue up any number of skits that will happen within this film. So we of course have a skit where we have these doctors that are to deliver a baby. And so the doctors end up mentioning that they need to go on and have certain machines that look really expensive because maybe an administrator is to be walking by while they're doing this uh, procedure. And we, of course, have one of the doctors that is to desperately ask that one of the machines they bring in has to make this dinging sound or this beeping sound. So we have this doctor, and so they're asking for all these machines, and we have this woman who is to be rushed through this hospital, and every single time they have to like smash through these doors, and she's like, oh my god, like, oh my god, like she's consistently feeling the impact of them smashing through these doors. So they of course have all these machines, and then they realize it's like, well, like, what do we need now? Oh yeah, we need the patient. So all of a sudden, like, they have to move all of these machines so that way the patient can get into this um, bed where they're like putting her in stirrups and all kinds of things. So all of a sudden, now that uh, this birth is happening, we have all these random people that end up going into the room watching. And so one of the doctors ends up turning to one of the men and be like, "Hey, who are you?" And he's like, "Well, like, I'm the husband um, of this woman." And so, like, well, no, like, we can't have you in here, but have a number of just random strangers all appear and watch this birth. So it seems that they had the one beeping machine that was to determine whether or not the baby is still alive inside the woman. I guess somehow they figured that out. So we go on and I guess have this administrator show up, and he goes on and talks about that they've leased this machine um, to kind of save money, and like talking about all these machines and everything about them. So they end up going on and quickly just delivering this child, and we have the woman who wants to know like the gender of the baby, and they're just like, yeah, we don't have time to do that. So yeah, so that ends up being like one of the sketches of this film. And but now let's get to the very beginning of this sketch, or the very beginning of this movie. So we have all these kind of older men, these elderly men, and so we have them all kind of rocking back and forth oddly while they're doing all of uh, this number crunching because they of course are to uh, have this sketch be called the Crimson Permanent Assurance. So we have these insurance adjusters that are kind of going on and they're rocking back and forth, and they're having to figure all these numbers. And so come to find out, like, the reason why they're rocking back and forth as they're uh, on their typewriters trying to crunch all these numbers is it's supposed to uh, really just give this visual of these guys who are just actually rowing back and forth on this massive ship, as if at some point we're going to see some mutiny happen. So one of the elderly guys is to notice that one of the guys finally see somebody getting fired, someone getting sacked. And so they're like, "Oh, hey guys, like, let's go together and like let's fight them. Let's fight these guys." So all of a sudden we now have the elderly workers fight against these corporate young guys and taking them all down and tear off uh, these fan pieces and now use them as swords. And so all of a sudden we turn these men into these pirate like characters, and they end up using like a part of this building that is to be under construction to use this whole wall as these like sails. And so all of a sudden the building ends up coming apart from where it is, and it starts to move. And so the building is moving to find out where the corporate executives are, so that way they can go on and attack and kill them off, because we have these guys who are to leave like corporations and executives and all those people like in the dust and kill them all off. So the elderly pirates all go on, we'll just call them the pirates. So they go on and find this one uh, skyscraper building, and they end up using like file cabinets as cannons. It's weirdly just interesting here. And so we have these guys who go and chuck these items and use them as kind of like these like rope hook things. And so these guys end up jumping into this skyscraper and breaking all these windows. And now all the corporate guys are like, oh my god, like we need to get all these readouts and all of the like all of this paperwork, and we need to have one guy who lives here out of everybody, so that way he can get this information out and like we can save this data. So, but slowly but surely, we start to have one by one the pirates going on and killing off all these corporate guys, to where there's one cornered executive left who just jumps out this window himself, and they're like, yeah, like we got all of them, we killed them all. So come to find out, those same corporate executive guys are all trying to figure out the meaning of life, because they are wanting to try and buy or sell it. And they're like, well, like, but what is it exactly? And they're trying to put the pieces together, and then all of a sudden the pirates end up breaking in, and they're like, well, hey, like the narrator is like, well, hey, like, I'm sorry, but like we've gone on and now had this sketch interfere with a sketch that we've already done, and so like they end up kind of cutting away from that. So, but I thought that was kind of funny. So we now let's go into this other skit. So we seem to have this Catholic man with this Catholic woman, as this woman, it seems, is to be cooking, and all of a sudden like a baby just falls out of her, and she ends up telling her oldest, like, hey, can you get that? Can you get that baby? So come to find out, there's a reason why this baby just easily falls out of this woman. It's simply because she is to have like 100 of them in one room. And so come to find out, the dad of this home is to have lost his job. And so now we, of course, are to go on and have this father who is to tell all of his kids that his kids are going to have to make money, get involved in medical experiments. And they're all like, really? Like, that's what we're going to have to do? And the dad's like, well, yes, sons and daughters, because because I can't pay for any of you anymore. So, like, I don't have the money to afford any of this. So, you guys are just gonna have to go and do medical experiments. So, because and we start to at some point have like the father saying it's like, well, like, yeah, the reason why I have so many kids is because my religion won't allow me to have a rubber because I'm a Catholic, and so because they can't go on and have man juice be wasted, um, and so they go on and have this whole song about man juice not getting wasted and not one like bit of it, and how it's great and how it's this and that and fantastic and whichever. And so they do this whole goofy song about this, and then we turn around and have another religious man who's like, well, yeah, like, I'm a Protestant, and or something like that, and he ends up going on to this whole rant about he can go on and buy like a rubber at any point, as he's known like every nickname for any number of these rubbers. And we have his wife that is going on of like, well, like, why, like, aren't you going on, and why aren't you buying a rubber so we can go at it? And the guy is to turn around and mention it. It's like, well, it's because of their religious beliefs is the reason why they won't go on and get a rubber themselves. And like, he just keeps turning it on the other family, and how they were to have so many kids, and this couple has only done it twice and has kids twice. And so we have that whole skit. So, and then that turns into them being at this church where they're going on and singing these unusual songs, uh, that are to tie into God and how he's huge, and he's enormous, and he's fantastic, and this and that. Like, basically having like some inside joke about how big God's manhood it seems that this song is going. And so, and they go on and on about that. So, as well as we also then turn around and have this teacher and student like Sunday school thing where we have this teacher that is to talk about how certain people, if they go on and they do certain duties, that they're going to go on and be able to get this thing done at the end of all this. But then they have to like narrow down. It's like, well, hey, if you go on and you get your hair cut and you finish up your homework and you do this and you do that, and this will all lead to this, and then you won't have to go on and adjust your brother's clothing or something like that. I'm like, it's so weird. But so we have this teacher that is to go on and talk about lovemaking. And so he ends up going on and talking about how to please a woman, and goes into very much more descriptive words than I'm willing to be able to say here, because YouTube, I can go on and actually say the words. I don't have a problem with that, but YouTube does. Isn't that great? So it even gets to the point where a bed appears, and then this man is to go on and bed his woman. And when we have certain students who are all like snickering and laughing and whatever, we have the teacher who is going to be like, hey, like, so and so student, like, why are you going on and laughing here? And he's just like, oh, I like, and so the teacher ends up saying, it's like, well, hey, you're gonna get involved in doing this rugby match. So come to find out, this whole rugby match is we have all these kids against all these adults, and so these adults are just wailing on these kids. They're just beating the crap out of them. I'm like, oh my god, uh, in a rugby match, and so we have one of the guys who ends up tripping one of the kids as he's trying to score one point. And so we just start to see these guys who are just flying into scoring position consistently, while these kids are trying to stop these adults, but they can't do it. So we just see all these kids who are just kind of like lying on the ground in agony because they just hurt. And all the adults are just like, yeah, like we're winning. Yeah, we beat them. Yeah. Okay. So we then turn around, and so that ends up ending finally that whole sketch of things. But we then start to go into these kind of military or like army kind of sketches. So we end up having one sketch where let's cover this one. We have this sketch where these army men are all thinking that they're going to die soon. So they want to say one final goodbye to their superior. And so they end up doing that by like showering him with gifts to the point of like they ended up giving him this like glass clock. And he's like, oh wow, this is wonderful. Like, yeah, I'm definitely going to carry this with me through the battlefield. And then they also end up giving him this like massive grandfather clock. And they're like, well, yeah, like it seems that one of the other guys like didn't realize that we already got you this, and so they bought you that also. And he's like, oh, okay, all right, great, like this is cool. And then all of a sudden they end up also like making him a cake, and he's like, okay, like I think that we just like won't have time to eat this cake. And they're like, no, like you need to eat this cake. Like, you know how much time we spent making this cake, having to like perfect it. Like it wasn't so easy in this environment that we're in, but man, like we made this cake and it's freaking amazing. And then the superior is like, okay, yeah, you're right. And so because the more and more they keep giving this guy like watches and clocks, and it's weird. And so and everybody's dying around him. Everyone's getting shot in the chest or the face, and everyone just continues to die around him to where like the only person that's really left is just this guy who's setting up this table to eat this cake. And so like everyone ends up dying at some point because they're just stupidly just putting a cake together. So but we also have this this one story about this kind of drill sergeant who's going on and telling his guys that they're going to march throughout this facility. And all of a sudden we start to have one guy who kind of chimes in and is like, well, like sir, like I'm gonna go on and like I need to uh do like piano lessons. And the guy's like, oh, you have piano lessons, huh? And it's like, okay, we'll go on and do that. And so he ends up leaving. And then more and more there ends up being like an excuse for somebody to go on and leave, that like one person needs to like reread a book. And the drill sergeant's like, okay, like go on then, you need to read that book. And so then all of a sudden we have the drill sergeant who's like turning to them. It's like, well, hey, like none of you want to go on and see like a movie, do you? And they're all like, yeah, I think we all want to go and see a movie. And so by the end of all this, we just had the drill sergeant who is just marching by himself in this base, in this military base. And I thought that that was kind of a funny skit. So moving on. So, we also have let's get this skit out of the way. We had a skit where like the fish came back in, and they of course were asking, it's like, well, hey, are they ever going to get to the meaning of life thing? And so they're like, well, maybe they won't get to it. And so we have this couple that goes into this restaurant, and it seems that the waiter is to be giving its customers like items to talk about. And so he ends up at first giving them like philosopher topics and to finally talk about the meaning of life. And it's like, well, hey, like, what is the meaning of life? And so it's like, well, like, do you ever like wonder why we're all here? It's like, and the guy's like, well, yeah, we just come here to eat. And he's like, no, like, why are we really here? Like, why are we all on this earth? It's like, I don't know. So the waiter goes on and gives them all these like talking points about all these like philosophers, and like the couple doesn't know what to do with them. They're just like, okay, well, like this guy's name starts with an S. Like, do you think that has anything to do with anything? And like, I don't know. So they keep talking, and they're talking about like this person who is to sing music, and do they think that there's any tie to philosophy via that? And they're like, and so they kind of give up on the whole like meaning of life philosopher thing, and so they end up asking the waiter, it's like, well, hey, do you have another topic to bring up? And so he's like, well, yeah, like I have like organ transplant. And like, organ transplant? What? So we then transition to another skit where, coming to find out, this guy is to do the right thing and want to donate his liver. And so come to find out, he had made this donor card, and we all of a sudden have these guys that are to come in and tell this man that's like, well, sir, like, we're gonna go on and take your liver now. And the guy is like, well, I'm sorry, but like, I still need my liver. Like, I still need my liver to live. And they're like, well, yeah, but like, we need your liver. And so we're gonna take it from you. We're gonna like repossess your liver. And so this guy is to be like kind of like held down, and so they end up taking his liver from him. They're using these like odd contraptions or odd tools to try to get this guy's liver. And so we have one of these guys who it seems like they have like get-ups on as they look like doctors, but they're not actually doctors. So we instead have them like one of the guys, like the repossessor guy, ends up going on to talk to the wife of this man, and is to mention, it's like, well, hey, like, what are you gonna do now that like, obviously this guy's gonna die, we're gonna take his liver and he's gonna die here, so like, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna go on and remarry and maybe find someone else? And the woman's like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. So all of a sudden, the guy is like, well, hey, like, if you're not going to go on and remarry, like, and you don't know what you're going to do, like, you can always, like, donate an organ. And she's like, I don't know. And so all of a sudden, we then have this one guy who just comes out of this girl's refrigerator and is to start singing this song about the earth and like all of these numbers, and I'm like, man, this song would have had to have been like incredibly hard to sing all the lyrics for, and could you imagine if he did it all live? And like, that's the talent of these guys, where it's just like they are just like saying all these like heavily complicated things, and it's like breathing to them, where it's like you can't break any of these men because they're just so talented that and plus also they probably came up with all of this information to know how to have performed it all. So after this long stretch of song, we then have this guy go back into this fridge, and so the woman's like, "Yeah, I think I will go on and just kind of like donate my liver, or donate an organ, or something like that." So that sketch ends up ending. That weird, goofy sketch that I didn't understand. It was a little obscure, but so we then go on into the sketch where or skit. Uh, let's go into the Mr. Uh, Creosote sketch where we have this guy that is to go into this restaurant. He's abnormally large. And so this man is to consistently need a bucket because he's at this restaurant and he's barfing consistently into this bucket to where it's spraying consistently to the point of his like shoulder is just covered with vomit. Why is this in this movie? I don't know. But so this guy's to go on and like disgust all of the people that are around him eating. And so this guy is to order this massive meal as well as him like barfing on his own menu. And so the waiter is to kind of like push all the vomit so that way he can read him this menu. And then he ends up folding back up the menu, and he's consistently holding on to this menu, and the menu is like is consistently falling out with all this vomit. Why am I explaining this? I have to. So weird, so weird. But we go on to have this guy who orders all of this wine and all of this food, like a whole page worth of food. And so we then see the aftermath of this guy eating every single thing. And so all of a sudden we then have him eat this mint. Like, oh hey, here's your after dinner mint. And so the guy's like, no, I can't eat this, I'm completely full. And it's like, well, it's just a mint. And so the guy ends up just kind of shoving this mint into this guy's mouth, and he eats it, and because of this mint he realizes that he's going to explode. And so the waiter is like ducking, covering. He's trying to find this one like place where he can just kind of hide as this guy's going to explode. And then this guy explodes on every single one of the customers, and like all the customers start to become ill. So, and we start to see this guy's heart like out of his body and all these organs and stuff like that, because this guy is exploded now and you kind of see his insides. So after the aftermath of all that, they haul this guy away. And so now we have like the cleanup crew going on and cleaning up all the barf. And so we have a moment where the old lady is to mention like where her life has gone to the point of her now cleaning this up because she had done this previous job and it had like hurt her before, to the point of her like, hey, now I'm going on and doing this job and I'm cleaning up after people. And so at some point she ends up making some remark about Jewish people, and the waiter is like, oh no, like he ends up putting the bucket over her head, and is to say, it's like, well, hey, like I didn't want to go on and have that kind of joke being present. And so we have the waiter that is realizing that the cameraman is starting to walk off, and he's like, hey, wait a minute, wait. don't leave. And so all of a sudden the cameraman ends up finding out some other waiter who is Gaston. And oddly enough, Gaston is like, well, hey, how about you just like kind of follow me? And so Gaston just starts walking and walking and and the settings keep changing. And so Gaston walks all the way to what I guess is to be his home, where he is to mention about his mother and is to talk about what his mother had goals for him to do and accomplish. And so all of a sudden, after Gaston is to start to talk to this cameraman, he ends up getting upset, and so he ends up walking away from the cameraman, and we then end up like transitioning. So I'm trying to think. There is possibly to be more skits somewhere. Uh, there's so many things. Uh, we also had the one skit where the guy is to have these like huge, large, bendy arms, and they're asking where's the fish, and they're consistently saying where's the fish. We have this character who is to have this like unusually like bare number of clothing on, and they're talking about where's the fish, where's the fish, where could it be? We have this character that has this like unusual mask on and so on and so forth. So they're all just talking about where's the fish bizarrely for a number of minutes here. So let's move on from that because it's just obscure and it makes no sense, as well as a number of the things that appear in this film. Let's go on the let's talk about the Grim Reaper sketch. So we have the Reaper that makes their way to this home, and he's like, I'm the Grim Reaper. It's like, oh, great. Why are you here? It's like, I'm Reaper. I'm so I'm Death. And like, oh, okay, great. So they bring him in because supposedly these guys have brought in some Americans and they're all having a dinner. And so the Grim Reaper is just to consistently say that he's the Grim Reaper and he's Death and he's like, oh, okay, all right. So they at some point end up asking him, it's like, well, hey, what are you here for? And he's like, I'm here to collect all of you. And they're like, well, like, how did we die? And come to find out, there was to be this fish that was to be like poisoned to the point of, I guess, them all dying from it. And there was one character that mentioned, hey, I didn't eat the fish. But so all of a sudden we have all these characters all die at once, and they end up like walking off as they're all now spirits, and every single one of them end up going into their cars, and so their cars are all like spirits also. And so the Grim Reaper is to take them all on to heaven, where it seems that they're all now at this like dinner location, and they end up getting a performance by this guy who is to talk about heaven and like how heaven can always snow, and that at some point uh, heaven is to do this and do that and all these crazy goofy things. So because by then they want to focus on like death. And we also had this skit where a guy was being chased by all these women who were just wearing these helmets and knee pads, and that's it. And so this guy, I guess, chose this death. And so this guy is running away from all these women, and he ends up falling into his grave where they had perfectly planned all this. And the people who are doing this guy's funeral are saying that this guy was to die from from this awfully overly sexual joke that they're doing for the skit, and so the guy ends up falling to his death, and he ends up falling into his grave and dying, and so we end up seeing later, like in heaven, all the women uh, that are all wearing these helmets and knee pads, and I guess they all had died afterwards too. So so I'm trying to like just scour my brain to think if there's anything left for me to go on and mention here. Uh, I think most of everything is covered. I could be wrong. Um, let me pause here for 1 second. One left, and I think that might be the last one. So we have these soldiers that are in this war, and so we have these guys that are like in the smack dab middle of this war. This Nalu or Nalal or something like that kind of just war. So these guys are getting their camp infiltrated by this war, but they really don't go on and acknowledge that it even is going or is happening. And so we go on, we have one soldier who makes it into another friend of his camp and is to just kind of go on as things are as usual, and that this guy's assistant is to be giving him this coat for them to get kind of prepared for their day. And all of a sudden they go from one side or the other to this other camp, and come to find out there is to be a guy who is missing part of his leg. So they go on to this other tent to meet with this guy, and one of the soldiers who had the kid with the coat, he ends up getting stabbed and he ends up getting killed. So we have them all go on to this tent, and come to find out the guy has to lose like a good portion of his leg, and they are to try to figure out how exactly he lost his leg. And even the guy himself doesn't even know. He's like, I don't know, I just woke up one day and like my leg was gone. And so they end up going like, well, that looks really, really bad. Like, we should probably call a doctor. So the doctor ends up coming in, and the doctor looks at it and he's like, yeah, like he starts poking it with his pipe, and he's like, well, yeah, like this might be like some kind of virus, and like if you go on and just kind of rest, and like you should be fine. And the guy's like, really? Like, all right. So but then the guy's like, well, like actually I'm playing this off, and it's honestly worse than what it really is. But I don't think that this is really a virus. I think that this is something else. Like, I think it's from a tiger, that your leg had gotten bitten off by a tiger. And they're like, tiger? Really? And they're like, yeah. So we have the soldiers who are all going off, dragging this guy along with them to find out where this tiger is. And so they end up finding this what they think is a tiger, but instead they find out that it's just two men who are all dressed in this tiger costume. And they end up saying that the reason why they're dressed as this tiger is because they're doing some commercial, or they're doing like a number of other things to just kind of make up some story. So come to find out, so these guys are kind of looking for a leg, and they're like, I don't think we have anything like that. But then the more and more they start talking to these guys, they're like, well, maybe we do have a leg, but like it's not one of ours, or it might just be like somebody who just kind of left something aside. Has nothing to do with us though. So the more and more we just kind of talk to these people, the more it's kind of a goofy situation. But so yeah, like that ends up kind of wrapping up that story, that sketch. We also had like the whole war that ends up just kind of stopping, and like one of the sides of the war, they just kind of run off after they kind of hear the word virus. So yeah, so with that said, that covers most of what happens in this movie. There was a whole thing of this little sketch thing where there was this tree that started to like one by one lose its leaves, and then a bunch of leaves just fell, and then the Grim Reaper comes in, just this weird goofy animated thing by the end of this film. But then we go on, and at the end of the movie are to tell us that this is the end of the film, and then we have one of the people come in and just saying like, well, yeah, the real meaning of life is for you to like eat your vegetables and just and run X number of times a day and so on and so forth. So they never go on and they actually ever answer it. It's just like, oh no, just enjoy this movie for what it is. So with that said, I think I'm just gonna go on and get out of here. Hopefully, I was to go on and kind of just in some way talk about this movie, describe it a little bit, and then just get out of here. So, goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Hopefully, you went on and watched this movie, or had seen this in the past, or you're reflecting on your favorite Monty Python film, or whatever. And at some point, you can just let me know what that is, and I'll go on and check it out at some point later on. So with that said, goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.